Hey guys, it's Worthington again, back with another video here, and we're still on this trip series. There is a lot of trips. There are a lot of trips that I went on. Mostly when I was younger, I was really a psychonaut. The more modern times of my experiences have been very different. We're going to get into that and the lessons and all those things like I talked about. This next story here is a unique one that I don't know what the experiences are that are out there. Some are very negative, actually. The trip that we're going to be talking about today is a different substance, a different plant, a very dangerous one. And so it's going to come with a disclaimer. It's not safe at all. It is not advisable to take this plant, this substance. The plant in question we're talking about is Datura. The particular Datura species that I took was called Datura anoxia. And it's also referred to as Jimson weed, devil's weed, I think maybe witch's flower. There's a few names out there. It's a poisonous plant, contains atropine, scopolamine, and several other psychotropic chemicals, and it's very dangerous. It can result in death. It can result in massive psychotic break. It can result, I'm not sure if it can result in blindness or not. That was when we were kids. We were warned that you could go blind taking it. It does affect your eyes, and I'll be talking about that in the story. So yes, I had a number of experiences with Datura, and for me, those experiences were, believe it or not, very positive. In fact, some of my favorite experiences were on Datura. Again, that is not to encourage anyone to do it. And by the way, with adulthood, with the pressures of life and the traumas and the difficulties that come with becoming an adult, the responsibilities, I am very not only respectful but frightened by Datura. I do intend to take it again before I die. Maybe it'll be on my deathbed, I'm not sure. It's certainly not anything I'm considering right now. I'm not in a position to take it at the moment, and it is extremely powerful stuff. Some of the deductions that I've made based off of other stories out there, and stories by, for instance, Mark Plotkin, who talked about asking South American and Central American shamans how they discovered curare, poison, dart substance, the poison that they put on darts, not coming from the frog, but there's other curares that came from plant mixtures, and many of them were actually either one plant or multiple plants mixed together, also similar to ayahuasca. And in the questioning where he was trying to figure out how they gained this knowledge, which they had vast knowledge around medicines, different fungi, and how they cured earaches and other bacterial infections, many diseases they were able to cure, and of course the psychotropic experiences with ayahuasca and yopo and things like that. When questioned where they received this knowledge, they would say from the plants told them, in the kind of Western egoic mindset that I feel our civilization, our society has. It's kind of viewed as, just a juvenile, stupid thing for these people to say. They're just kind of heathens, just in a sense almost immature, undeveloped, not up to our scientific standards. And I think that's a very big mistake. I think they had a sophistication that we don't truly understand, and that sophistication was not exactly scientific, right? And that's where it gets interesting. So them saying the plants told us, as Mark did a little further digging with some of the shamans, they pointed out a certain plant species that they claimed was how they were able to divine this knowledge, which is actually the purpose of Datura. It's for divining knowledge, which is different than the other serotonin agonists and things that are more, I think, about teaching you the right way to live and how to become mentally, emotionally, spiritually healthy. Datura isn't about that. It's about something different, something very powerful, and something quite scary, honestly. And so, yeah, with that brief introduction, we'll go into my experience with it. I had some reading with it. I also had found at the time someone that I looked up to, was a martial arts coach at the time, and someone who had introduced me into Kundalini meditation and meditation in general. I had found out that he had ventured into psychedelic uses, and he recommended that his students read various literature, including Carlos Castaneda. And Carlos Castaneda's first 2 books, he mentions the use of Datura. And I was young, impressionable kid, basically. Looked up to this guy. He was larger than life to me as a teacher. His name was Tony. And, when I had found out he had used LSD and used magic mushrooms and things like this to further his meditation goals, I became immediately interested. And, I even approached him and said, what's this Datura stuff? What is this Jimson weed? And he got very kind of stern with me, and even a little upset, and said, don't you ever touch that stuff. Don't ever ingest Jimson weed. And being a kid and how kids are, that made me even more curious. And it was a problem in our neighborhood. So in San Bernardino, there were people who were taking Jimson weed to get high, and with mixed results, often very negative. Lots of stories of people with massive psychotic breaks, people who died from overdose. A lot of times making teas, really ill-advised if you don't know what you're doing. Making a tea is really dangerous stuff. There may be Aboriginal, indigenous folks out there who made teas and other tinctures and pastes and maybe rubs, I don't know. If you don't have that knowledge, you are really playing with fire. There's also a misconception that when it comes to plants, that they're sort of weak, so we have to do an extraction process, sort of like extracting cocaine from the coca leaf, or further processing the marijuana plant to get these really high level THC extracts. That kind of leads to this idea that nature and plants in their kind of natural raw form aren't capable of killing you, aren't capable of causing very deep change in consciousness, very deep effect on your psyche, and that is a big mistake. Nature is very capable of producing extremely powerful effects on your mind and body. And so I think that mentality around the Datura led people to do some really stupid things, including, like I said, making teas. And, there were some friends of friends that I know passed away from taking Datura. And there was also a few friends that had full-on psychotic breaks and ended up in sort of, mental health facility type places, temporary places, Ward B type facilities, arrest by, law enforcement, and interventions of that kind. We had one friend who was, at the time, around, probably weighed only 115 pounds, if that. And his name was Jared. He ingested a tea and went home and destroyed his home, attempted to rape his own mother, to sexually assault his own mother, beat up his dad. Police showed up, and it took 5 or 6 really large San Bernardino PD officers to hold this kid down. And after that, he went completely straight. He never touched another drug in his life. I wonder if he's still sober to this day. He probably is. It left an impact on him. That is a really terrible outcome, right? Can you imagine the effect on the family, the actions that he took under that influence? Of course, he didn't remember any of that stuff, but really, really bad stuff. So yeah, there was a lot of fear around it. And then Tony's admonishments and, real stern warnings to me not to take this. I knew it was serious. I knew it was serious stuff, but my curiosity had the best of me, and I was in search of power. As a young man, I thought, hey, there's something powerful about this stuff. There's some capabilities that could be unlocked by, attempting these dangerous journeys. And so I went ahead and decided I was interested in going to take Datura. And in the past trip stories here, I've mentioned this group of people that I spent time with. Matt, with the sort of hippie, dirty house with the cockroaches, and parents that were sort of amenable to the usage of certain drugs, not all drugs, and that environment there, and the group there that was mostly, they were kind of goth, kind of misfits, who all were very deep into LSD and psychedelics, and of course they were smoking pot and those things. They were, though, as a group, against the Datura. Everyone knew the dangers, and so within that group there was even a day where everyone had said, hey guys, let's kind of promise each other we're never going to touch Datura, we're never going to eat the Jimson weed, because, as I said, there was kind of a sleuth of these incidents happening, and people being poisoned and having terrible outcomes. And so everyone kind of put their hands in the middle. It's like, yeah, we're not touching Datura. It's a little pact amongst our group. And, I was sort of crossing my fingers behind my back, to be honest. And it's interesting because my first Datura experience was at Matt's house. I would go over there quite often, as I said, to get away from the restrictions of my home life, to be able to ingest psychotropic substances in a relatively accepting environment. And so there came a day where I decided I am going to take Datura. So I knew what it looked like. I knew where it grew. I knew that I was going to only ingest the root. Some people ingest the seed balls. Some people ingest the leaves and roots and seed balls. From my understanding of some of the writing out there, the flower is specifically from the shamanistic traditions only for injuring people, for trying to harm an enemy, for putting hexes on people, things like that. I don't know how deep that rabbit hole goes, but I knew I wasn't going to touch the flower, and I knew I was just going to stick to the root. And even from some of the reading, Carlos Castaneda talks about the depth of the root and how far down you go may have some correlation to how powerful the effect is. And so I didn't dig real deep down on the root, and I didn't go for a very large mature plant. I actually dug up a pretty juvenile, what appeared to be a juvenile plant. I dug down probably a good 8 inches into the soil max, and then I cut off a piece of root there. I then, at that point, I decided I was just going to eat the root raw. No preparation like teas, as I said, no paste, no attempt at processing. I was going to only eat the root as is and see what the effects were. And I was quite nervous. Even back then when I was a psychonaut and really kind of gung-ho about taking psychedelics, once I'd gotten, through a few of those early experiences, we told a couple of those stories. They were some of them very frightening, but once I kind of conquered those and made it, I was kind of feeling a little cocky, but I was not with the Datura, and that's for a good thing. I think maybe that's why my experiences were as positive as they were. I had very positive experiences with it. But first day, I went over to Matt's house where Sarah and Malice and Ben and all these people are kind of hanging out, Matt's brothers, and ingested a very small portion of this root. So this root was maybe a 1/2 inch thick. The upper portions of the root tend to be really fibrous and hard to chew or even break up. The part of the root that I had was almost like a carrot consistency, and so I ate pretty much like a very small nibble, like I want to say probably 1/8 of an inch of a piece of that 1/2 inch thick root. And it's the most bitter, horrendously poisonous tasting thing, right? As far as flavor goes, it just tastes like bitter poison. It doesn't give you that vomit retching experience. It's really ironic, right? I've never actually done ayahuasca, but in hearing some of the experiences people have had with that substance or tinctures, I've had experience with this, let's say tinctures from San Pedro cactus, right? Horrible, awful tasting stuff, kind of gives you that retching, wanting to vomit experience. You don't get that with Datura. You just get this horrifically bitter, you just know it's poison. And it dries your mouth out like nothing. Marijuana cottonmouth that people joke about is a fraction of what Datura dry mouth is. And I've since then learned from a nursing friend of mine that the reason is actually the scopolamine. And some of you who may be aware of scopolamine know that scopolamine is a very dangerous substance that is used illegally, mostly in Colombia, for nefarious reasons. You apparently can lose your free will and people can control you, sort of zombie powder. And there's movies out there, for instance, The Serpent and the Rainbow, in which it's a true story about a doctor who's trying to find new anesthesias, hears about a zombie powder being used to take over people and control them and make them work, and also kind of this dark magic voodoo idea of if you make an enemy of the voodoo witch doctor, they might hit you with the zombie powder and make you a slave of theirs, or steal your soul somehow. In that movie, his kind of trail of breadcrumbs towards what he thinks the substance is coming from leads to the tetrodotoxin of the pufferfish. I believe that's an intentional misleading, if you ask me. I don't believe the tetrodotoxin would have any type of effects that are along these lines, but scopolamine does, and that is extracted from the Datura family of plants. There's several types of Datura. Some of you in, say, Southern California might be aware of a plant called Hell's Bells. That is also a Datura. And in Colombia, there's a tree version that they call the drunken tree, or the borracho tree. And that is also a Datura, and that's where the scopolamine is extracted from in Colombia. So kind of a history there. The scopolamine, though, it turns out, has another aspect to it and is used legitimately in medicine to dry people out, especially in end-of-life care, when they're getting what we might call the death rattle and they're getting fluid in their lungs, which sounds, if you've ever been around when someone passes that way, pretty unpleasant. They use it to dry that out. It really dries out any fluid in those air passageways and also in your mouth. And so, yeah, the dry mouth is unbelievable, almost unbearable. It's so dry. It doesn't matter how much water you drink. It won't do anything for you. And then, so that's part of the experience of eating it. Super dry mouth, horrible bitter taste. And then what happens is a malaise, a fatigue, a lethargy takes over your body. And that's basically what happened to me. Now, one of the early symptoms I had with it was that lethargic sensation, the really dry mouth, and interestingly enough, some difficulty urinating, where even though the bladder's full, there doesn't seem to be a way to release the urine, and so you almost have to force or push it out. That's a rather disconcerting symptom, and one that's a little so it gives you a little concern for what your state of well-being is. But those were basically the only symptoms I got. So you feel kind of sickly in a way, right? Not terribly sick, not nauseous, nothing like that, at least back then. I don't know what I would experience now. So then, that was the first day. So this took 3 days, and that was the first experience I had. I didn't take any more. Remember, I was very concerned, so I wasn't going to immediately reach the dose even further. No, I let it go. And then the following day, woke up feeling pretty normal, basically no effect, and decided to try again. And this time I ate a little more, and I was very cautious. So that next time around, I probably ate, I would say a 1/4 inch, right? So double the amount, probably a 1/4 inch in thickness of that root, of that 1/2 inch thick kind of root, and swallowed it down. Chewed up, swallowed down, got the same symptoms, horrific flavor there, that poisonous bitterness, dry mouth. Went through the same thing. This time a little more lethargic, more just kind of sleepy. Not what I expected, because with psychedelics I don't feel sleepy. I usually you can feel the effects coming on, especially with serotonin agonists, and the like, when you're talking about mescaline, LSD, psilocybin, kind of this, okay, it's coming on, I'm feeling it, kind of a revving up, a going up, towards the peak. None of those experiences with the Datura, and just tired and not wanting to do anything and just lay around. And so similar issue with urinating. And so the day kind of came and went, same thing. Now this whole time I was at Matt's house and just kind of lazy, and people are like that over there, smoking pot, we're doing nothing, they're playing guitar, parents wouldn't think anything of it. I want to say that this time around, I was fresh out of high school because I'd taken a California proficiency test. So I was just kind of bumming around a bit before I was, kind of going into college, and I really didn't take that very seriously anyway that first year. So, spending a lot of time doing a whole lot of nothing over there. So it wasn't that strange for me to be kind of just laying around at Matt's house amongst the roaches and the weed smoking and the craziness there. So, I went home again that night, went to sleep, and I kind of was disappointed. Now I'm going, okay, this stuff just poisons you. I got the sense of if I ate a lot of this, it could really kill me or do serious damage to my body, because again, I'm feeling these sensations of things that they're not good things, right? Not being able to urinate, really having a serious dry mouth, just the flavor alone, the lethargic sensation I was having, told me that, yeah, this could definitely poison you, but I wasn't getting the experience that I was looking for, which is this mind-blowing psychedelic, journey. So final day, the third day, this day came around, same kind of routine, went back to Matt's house, had my root, in a plastic bag, had it in a Ziploc, baggie, sandwich baggie, and I take it out and I decided, okay, this is the last time I'm gonna do this. and I'm thinking in my head, you know what, this Datura stuff's just made up, or it's not, maybe these people, came close to dying and had some sort of delirium, or, whatever it is. This stuff isn't, I'm thinking to myself, this is my last day, first of all, and I'm like, I'm gonna give it one more shot, but I have my doubts about it at this point. So this time I decided to fully double up. I went, actually more than double up. I went from probably what was a 1/4 inch that day. I went to basically a whole inch of that root, which really was a significant increase, maybe even a little over an inch, 1.25 inches. Like, I was like, okay, I'm going for it. If I get sick, I feel like I can make it through this amount. That actually is pretty stupid if you think about it, because almost an inch, that's 4 times the amount I had taken before. Maybe not quite. Maybe I didn't quite go 4 times. It was close to an inch that I ate. Now that I think back, I was still nervous about it, and I knew it was poisonous. But yeah, close. Let's say somewhere around close to an inch of that root. And I ate that down, and it just started the same way it always did. The horrible bitterness, the extremely dry mouth, the lethargic feeling of just wanting to lay around, and then the trouble urinating, and all that happened. But then I noticed something. My vision changed. And it didn't, I guess I hadn't taken enough dosage the days before, but this time what happened was I had extremely blurry vision. Back then as a kid, I had perfect vision, 20/20 all the way, never wore glasses, never had an issue with this. I kind of, it was like I had my vision's going bad now that I'm an older man, so it had that blurry effect. Like, I couldn't, if I picked up the newspaper or something, I couldn't read it. It was just too blurry. Everything kind of had a bit of a blur to it. So my vision was definitely affected, and that made me very concerned, because of course the rumors were that you could go blind on this stuff, and I was like, oh boy, I hope I haven't really done it to myself. That was another level of concern now, because my vision was absolutely affected. I could not see as I normally would, and it felt very much like if you needed glasses. I found out later with other friends who experimented with me and things like this, that if you put glasses on, it actually can correct the issue that happens with Datura. And interestingly enough, and those sort of talk about LSD will actually reverse that blurry vision. At least that's what I was told by someone who was really crazy guy that I used to be kind of a psychonaut with. But we're diverting now. Let's stay on task. So you get a blurry vision, and that is concerning. Trouble with the urination, those things. So I sit there and I go, well, what am I going to do? It's too late. You kind of bought the ticket, got to go for the ride type of thing. And so I just kind of sat there, just calmed myself. And as a younger man without responsibility, it's kind of easier just to let things go for some reason. As you get older, that type of thing might have been really led to a serious anxiety attack of not being able to just let go and go, oh, well, this is where I'm at, right? It's much harder as you get older, and responsibilities and the traumas and all the things you need to deal with. And the understanding, about, as you get older, you understand the world's a dangerous place. So, yeah, I sat there and I pretty much was able to let that go, and I'm sitting there. And back then I was a cigarette smoker. So I used to smoke, all of us smoked back then. We all smoked cigarettes, usually Marlboro Reds. If we were, too poor, we were buying, back then it was GPCs, generic brand cigarettes, basically in the red format, so full flavors. And that was part of the routine back then. So I'm sitting there and, thinking about having a cigarette, but I look across the room and I look at the white kind of painted interior walls of the house, and I start to see red. So red. And this is something that Carlos Castaneda talks about. And I had read this, of course, in his book. He talked about if the weed likes you, that you might see red splotches welling up in your vision. If the weed doesn't like you, then you might see black, and that's a horrendous sign, and you're in for a dreadful experience, and lucky if you survive it. So I don't know if that was pre-programmed into my psyche, and that's why it happened. But the interesting thing is it always happened, and all the other people who took it with me later, which wasn't a lot of people, only a select few ever took it with me and had positive experiences, but they all experienced the same thing, the red splotches, the red welling up in the vision. So red started welling up, especially around things where I'm looking at a white surface, right? And it'd be this red welling up of color, and just kind of suffuse my vision in a way. And that was the beginning of me going, oh, wait a second, this is different. I am definitely seeing something, and it is red, and that's interesting. And so that went on for a while. So I would sit there, and it would kind of come in waves. So red kind of welling up my vision. It would kind of well up in a more centralized area and spread out across my whole vision, and then kind of die back. And then it would do it again and well up and then die back. And then I might sit for a few moments kind of feeling fairly normal. And that's the other thing. I don't feel high. There wasn't a high feeling. There wasn't an intoxicated, inebriated feeling, other than just feeling lethargic and sleepy. That's it. And so nothing intense, nothing really that really grabs a hold of you, like you know, if you smoke DMT or do ayahuasca or something. I mean, you feel that, right? This isn't like that. You know, it's just very kind of lazy, lethargic feeling, but this visual effect is happening. It's like, okay, so something's really happening. And then I'm sitting there, and you know, I was a cigarette smoker, and this is what's important. And I started smoking a cigarette. So I'm smoking a cigarette, and this is important for the sake of the story. One of the reasons I don't smoke anymore is because cigarettes are not always a great experience. Let alone what the health consequences are. They just aren't always enjoyable. Sometimes you get an enjoyable cigarette that you enjoy, and sometimes it's just the addiction, and you're kind of forcing yourself to smoke this thing to get what you need, but also you get a nasty flavor in your mouth. Sometimes you get a headache. You get, you know, you just don't feel good. You get the lungs, you know, you get energy is impacted. You usually don't feel that great, right? Like it can really kind of impact you in a negative way. And what I noticed is that as a cigarette smoking addict, there were times when I had good cigarettes where I really enjoyed them, kind of mediocre, just cigarettes where it was just kind of like, it's not that good or bad, but I'm an addict and I'm smoking. And then really bad cigarettes where it would just give you the headache and terrible taste in your mouth and just a bad overall sense of not feeling well. And those cigarettes, those bad cigarettes, as your addiction grows and you smoke more and you get more in a healthy state, they actually become more frequent. And so that's what eventually made me want to stop. And then of course the health effects, a lot of other reasons why I stopped, different story, that whole thing. But at the time I was a real smoker. And so I was, you know, sitting there smoking a cigarette, and I was having a good cigarette, and that's what's important. So I was having a good cigarette, and the flavor was just the best tobacco flavor you can have. Some people probably don't smoke or maybe have and didn't like it, whatever, might say, what is a good tobacco flavor? Well, I can't explain it to you unless you're someone who has smoked and really enjoyed the flavor of tobacco. Sometimes for a smoker, there's a time when you have just this enjoyable flavor of tobacco. It's just a really good flavor. And then with that, the nicotine high, the nicotine rush, and a sense of just calming euphoria and a sense of just kind of centering and feeling all right with that moment, right? And I was getting all of that, and I was blowing the smoke out and experiencing that, and something happened. You have to understand how poor I was back then. We were very, very poor. So, you know, we almost never had any money, and it was always a difficult task to even get cigarettes or get marijuana or get psychedelics like LSD and mushrooms when we wanted them. We always had to struggle and scrounge money and find a way and have hustles. You know, there was a time we used to paint curbs, so we used to paint addresses on curbs and walk door to door and have all these spiels and a lot of lies and stories about why we were doing it to get people to pay us. And so, we're broke, you know, and so I'm smoking this cigarette, having this amazing cigarette, a good cigarette, and then a thought occurred to me, and the thought was, we didn't buy cigarettes today. Where did I get money to purchase a pack of cigarettes, right? Where did I get a cigarette? And the minute I had that thought, you know, I looked down, and it's like something clicked. There was a feeling of something clicking, hard to explain. And I looked down, and I'm literally doing this, right? Like there's nothing in my fingers. There's no cigarette. And I just can't emphasize how real that cigarette was to me, including the effects of nicotine, including the smoke itself blowing it out, including the visual effect of the cigarette and the lit red cherry, all of the parts of the cigarette, the flavor, everything was present. And then all of a sudden there's nothing in my hands, right? And that shocked the hell out of me. Then I went, whoa, right? That really grabbed me, and I went, okay, this is like nothing I've ever been through before. I don't care LSD, DMT, any of the psychedelics out there. Never have I had this type of experience. So I'm like, wait a second, something's happening now. Now, it didn't scare me. I actually kind of enjoyed that. I was like, wow, that is very interesting. It might scare me nowadays. As I said, I'm a grown adult, so it's more difficult now with the set and where it's at and my kind of process towards I think there's a full circle kind of coming back to being a clean spirit as a child, right? Which is what I had back then for the most part. So I sat back and enjoyed the ride, and it happened a few more times. So meaning that went away, I kind of forgot about it, sat there feeling lethargic. And the lethargic feeling isn't a bad feeling. It is somewhat of a euphoria in a way. It's just that feeling of being lazy, you know? So I'm sitting there, and it happened again, you know, same thing. And it would be the same kind of cycle. I would realize, wait a second, we didn't get cigarettes today, and boom, I'd be back to not having a cigarette. And it just kind of phases to this experience. So then the next part was, after a few of those, and there was still kind of red splotches welling up in my vision as well at times during this experience, then I began to notice more visual stuff. So then I started to notice, ever since I had taken LSD, which I had taken LSD way before I had taken Datura, right, and had several experiences with it, and psilocybin mushrooms, I had noticed that a change had happened. I'd become more aware of certain colors. More notably, really, in things like white walls and ceilings and places where there was white or just direct light, I would see almost the prism effect, where it would separate into all the colors of the rainbow. Prior to my experience with LSD, I never had that effect, but after that I did. And that may have somehow played a role in this Datura experience, because I began to see all those colors, kind of the colors of the rainbow pixelated within the white walls of Matt's house, and in the ceiling. He had textured ceiling. And I was seeing that welling up of red splotches, but then I'd also see a pixelated, like millions of pixels of color, which were just light photons, I guess, in all their colors. And at one point I saw all of that color, which was pixelated on this white wall, suck up and then go up into the ceiling, into an intense focal point, the size of a water droplet. And it was like all of the rest of where this color had came from was devoid of color. Now it was true white, which is odd. And then it all sucked up into this one portion, and then it dripped out of the ceiling ever so slowly, like molasses, almost like the thickest molasses ever. And it started dripping out of the ceiling, and it dripped in front of me. Remember, this is all in what I call like sort of that technicolor, all the colors of the rainbow, extremely intense, vivid. And it dripped down to eye level, and then it opened up from what was like a droplet into a wavy square piece of almost like paper. I liken it to like origami paper, and I think origami paper comes in probably several sizes. I never got real big into origami, but there's a size that's probably 4 inches by 4 inches, maybe something like that. 4 inches by 4 inches, maybe 6 inches by 6 inches. That's bigger. And this thing came down, and it was like there was invisible wind. Now I'm indoors, there's no wind, but there's like this invisible, very slight breeze, and this piece of sort of fabric, but it's made out of this energy color, is just kind of floating and twisting and blowing in some sort of invisible breeze. And it has a pattern on it. Now the pattern wasn't geometrical in the way that like a mandala or something that's a mathematical pattern that's very angular in that way. This was very much like a pattern that you would see in nature, like the leaves behind me, like the ways in which things will be patterned in a natural way, not in a man-made angular, drawn with, a circle, compass, and rulers and things like that. So there's this pattern on there, and it was so real that I couldn't help myself. I went to, and it was like about arm's length away from me. I tried to grab it, capture it. And the minute my fingers touched it, and this is almost like a holographic image, it was so real. The minute my fingers just barely touched it, it shattered into millions of pieces. And all of that energy, or light, or whatever it was, went back into the walls and into the surroundings. And I went back to kind of seeing the house I'm sitting in, and seeing all that color, all those pixels of light in the walls, and then it sucked back up, back to that same place in the ceiling, and then dripped back down the exact same way. And it did that 2 times, where it came down, and it was maybe 3 times actually, where it came down and it was this same thing, like an origami piece of paper there with a pattern on it blowing in a visible wind. And same thing would happen every time I tried to touch it. So I tried to touch it, and it would shatter and go back up. Well, the last time it did it, it went back up, and then it dripped down. And when it dripped down this time, instead of coming all the way down, it opened above me. And it opened actually only on the right side of my body. And what I mean by opening is it opened up into like a half dome that completely covered my view. So I couldn't see the house over here, like my environment over here. All I could see was like a half dome. And then on the left side here, and it was literally splitting in half. So right at my nose basically is where this half dome thing, and it was kind of a grayish white, would stop. And then on the left I could still see the rest of the house, and that I was still in this room. And then what began to happen is this sort of half dome shape that was covering my entire body, and this was up by about 2 arm lengths above me and probably 2 arm lengths away from me, was like a projection surface. So what it reminded me of is like when you go to the planetarium type place, like in LA, I think I don't know if the Getty has it, or it's maybe Aeronautical Planetary Museum. It's someplace there where they have one of these really expensive projectors that projects everything in 3 dimensions, but it's a whole dome. So instead of watching a screen in front of you, they project it over the whole dome, and you can kind of sit back in your seat and you see the universe, you see the stars, you see the galaxies and all that stuff. That was what this was like, this projector. And it turned out that there was an image being projected onto it, and the projector was like my soul. It was coming from me. I was projecting an image onto this projection surface. And what the image was fairly simple. What it was a natural setting for the most part. I was on this side of a fence. So there was a fence that in back east are very popular, very, very commonplace, especially in farmland and rural areas, is a fence made out of 2 unprocessed logs, and then 1 log comes up, which is also fairly unprocessed, and there's notches cut out of it. And each one of the logs goes into the notches in the post log. And so there's 2 notches, and then there's 2 logs going this way. It's a very old style fence. Back east, there's a lot of those. And that's what I'm standing on, this side of a fence that's exactly that kind of fence. And then on the other side is sort of somewhat of field or pasture, and I'm actually kind of standing at the edge of sort of a pasture. And on the other side, and then as you go deeper into the pasture, there's a very deep, dark forest. And the forest has a very mysterious depth, extreme depth to it, beyond comprehension. And then right on the other side of the fence, well, a little further, at the edge, kind of the transition between the pasture and the forest, is a crow. And there's like every once in a while a tree, like a maple tree or an oak tree. And what's happening is this landscape is moving. And what it is it's like the camera angle. Of course, I'm the projector, though, which is interesting. My soul, my spirit is projecting this. The camera angle is showing a crow flying, and the crow is covering ground and passing these trees and passing things, and the forest is in the background. And it's all in that Technicolor. Like, all this stuff is made out of this crazy, all the colors of the rainbow effect. And that was it. That was the nature of the vision. And that was, my feeling was, that was, when they talk about going on a vision quest or something like this, that, you might hear when it comes to Native American stuff like this, it was a vision. That was a real a vision like nothing I've ever had, before. And after that, this was one of the most powerful experiences. My first real experience with Datura was probably the most powerful, although I had some powerful ones after that. Nothing quite to this degree. So I experienced that, and then it kind of faded off. And then I was just sitting there, and I was, at this point, I was blown away. And now I was fully sold on the power of Jimsaweed, power of Datura. Nothing to that. At that point in my experience had compared to it, and I would say even now nothing has compared to the Datura. Even things like very heavy dosages with other psychedelics, or even DMT, which is extremely powerful, and you see some amazing things, but just not quite like Datura is its own thing. So I was just blown away. I'm now fully a believer and convinced that this stuff is the real thing, and I'm sitting there. And this is when it kind of shifts gears and you go into the next phase. And so the next portion of what began to happen is that I was sitting there in the room. And remember, I'm kind of grabbing at things in midair. I must have looked like a total crazy person, and it gets crazier than that. And nobody in the house ever came up to me and said, "Hey, what's wrong with you? What's going on? Like, you on something? What's your deal?" Right? That never happened. And I don't know how that never happened, because I know I could not have been behaving normally. So I'm sitting there, and the next phase is that happens is when you go into the full dreams, what I call the full dream states, the dreaming scapes, but you're not asleep, you're fully awake, sort of like lucid dreaming on steroids, really. So sitting there in Matt's living room, and then you just get kind of zoning out is what it really is, and you're not bored. That's the funny thing, you don't really get bored, because you're so lethargic and you're just lazy, and you feel kind of all right if you're having a good experience. And I felt kind of all right just sitting there. And then I'm talking to a friend of mine, and a friend of mine was one of my good friends that I really enjoyed his company, especially on psychedelics, a guy named Aaron, and one of my favorite people back then, really, to do psychedelics with and stuff. And he was just a jokester, and he was funny, he would make me laugh all the time. He was just one of these people that's just absolutely hilarious and put you at ease, and just had such a great personality and feeling and energy when you're around him. And so he's there, and we're talking, and we're having a great time, and he's just cracking me up like he always does, and it was very similar to the cigarettes, only there was an added effect. Because what happened was something clicked. That same click feeling. There was a click of, and a feeling of a thought. And it really is the thought that's the catalyst. A thought occurred to me that said, when did Aaron get here? How did he get here? And that thought triggered that clicking sensation within me. And this time, though, it came with a visual. And it was a very powerful visual. And what I saw was similar to the Mayan calendar, if you know what that looks like. So that Mayan calendar with all of its hieroglyphs and things on it, right? It's got all these symbols carved into that big stone disc. It was kind of like that. There was all these symbols on this disc, but this disc was separated into tracks or rings. And there were several rings. I don't know how many. And if I try to look in my mind's eye and think how many there were, 1, 2, I don't know, 7 or 8 maybe. And there was an outer ring all the way to the very centermost ring or disc. And they're all spinning. And what happened is, when I had the thought of how did Aaron get here, when did he get here, what happened there, the outermost ring, everything was stationary, so this disc is just sitting there, and then the outermost ring clicked, and that's coincided with that feeling like I'm clicking with something in my environment. And then it began spinning, and I could almost hear like gears spinning, like a clicking, like brrr, like booting up almost in a way. But this is spinning, and then the gear, I call it a gear, almost like the ring inside of the outermost one began spinning, and the one inside of that, and one inside of that, and one inside of that, all the way, and they all start spinning. And not all of them are actually spinning in the same direction, which was interesting to me. And then the whole thing is spinning though, and once that's spinning, the vision of that disappeared, and Aaron, the first time anyway, he kind of impishly jumped over to behind the couch and scurried off and became like a little elf almost, and then scurried into the nether, into the ether, into nothing. And then he wasn't there anymore. And really odd how that transition happened too. Really weird. And gone. And then I'm back to reality. And then I'm back to really like sitting in Matt's house, and I'm blown the fuck away. Just completely blown away by it. And sit there in awe. Just complete shock and awe. But as time goes on, that wears off, and back to feeling kind of lazy and tired, and so I'm just hanging out. And then Tim's there. Tim was another friend of mine. And Tim was someone I did a lot of psychedelic journeys with. Oftentimes, too, after school or when I get done with work, or whenever I had some free time, go to Tim's house. We'd smoke weed together. We were really a lot of weed smoking back in those days, especially kind of with Tim and that was kind of another group that came later. But there was a few different friend cliques. So Tim's hanging out, and Tim knew Matt. He would probably come over once in a while, but not that often. And he's hanging out, and we're kind of talking like we do, and we're smoking some weed, which was the common thing that we do, and we're talking about, because back then it was like high school parties and stuff, the next kegger party, and what's gonna go on there, and who's coming and who the, you know, good looking girls are, stuff like that. And the same, and it's a pattern, right? The same thing happened. I get that question, thought in my mind of, wait a second, when did Tim get here? And that vision, the same vision flashed, and it's the vision of this disc with all these symbols, runes almost, whatever they are, you know, hieroglyphs. And it's stationary for a moment, and then I feel the click, and I hear it almost. I hear the first click of the outer ring, and after that first click, it goes click, 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 and it starts spinning. And then the other ring starts spinning, and then this time with Tim, he just turned into a mist, like a phantom, and then faded into the background like the Cheshire cat in Alice in Wonderland or something. They just kind of faded away. And this time I recognized something. I realized a pattern. What was happening was these moments only happened when my internal dialogue completely came to zero. And it was actually further than just what you might consider just the thoughts in your mind. It was actually beyond that. It was habits, it was everything, hence the cigarette smoking, right? Something was up with habits, and the Datura pointed that out to me. The Datura is very much a spiritual entity. It spoke to me in ways that I can't explain. I understood that habits were extremely important about what it meant for me spiritually in my life and my perception of the world, really. It was certainly pointing that out to me. And so, you know, that was a part of it, to the point where everything was stopping, even down to maybe even your subconscious layer, where there may be, you know, even if you do a bit of meditation, you get your mind to calm down a bit, maybe even get to somewhat of a quiet space. I think for most of us, there's still even below that surface of what is really noticeable, even more going on. And in this Datura experience, it was reaching a point where even that stopped. Everything stopped. And once that stopped, this wildly, you know, unlimited version of reality became accessible. And that was just amazing to me. And I noticed that it absolutely coincided with thoughts in my mind, my internal dialogue, my internal thinking. When that stopped completely, this other experience began, very much like a dream experience. And so then I was sitting there again, just kind of blown away, taking it all in, and it would take a few moments, and then I would go into the next one. And this happened with individuals several times, more than just those two. There were other friends of the time that I spent time with that weren't actually there, and the same pattern would happen. And then it kind of culminated in a climax when now I found myself drinking beer, and it was, back then there was a lot of, you know, this was right, I should have still had another year in high school. So the seniors, the juniors were partying, right? People would have kegger parties, you know, kind of that normal high school stuff. People drinking, having parties when their parents aren't home type thing. And that was a commonplace thing. And we had some fun parties when we were kids, man. There were still some days I remember just, wow, how much fun that was when there wasn't violence. It was a violent place, that town. But there were times when we really had some good parties. And so it was something to look forward to. It was something where we had a lot of fun. And so I'm at this kegger party, and I'm drinking beer, and there's a keg, and the keg's actually upstairs, and there's this, the house had a upstairs, very large room, large kind of game / master bedroom area where the keg was upstairs, and there were all these people from high school, and all these people I knew, and they're all having a blast, and people are smoking weed, and they're drinking beers, and they're laughing and partying, and it's all just kind of that scene of a party, and music in the background, and people filling their beers up, and I got a red party cup, and I'm like, okay, it's my turn. I fill up a beer, and I'm drinking the beer, and my buddy Tim was there again, and same thing with another friend of mine, Gabe, and his brother, I believe, was there, and his girlfriend, and all these people are there, and we're drinking, and it was just as real as this moment here, just real, and so it's interesting to kind of snap out of that, because there was the thought, right? The thought that happened there was very subtle, but it was just this realization that there was a discontinuation of time somehow. Somehow I'm at a kegger party, and until the thoughts start, this is the paradox of thought. I think not many people have really experienced the true stoppage of internal dialogue to the depth I'm talking about, because it's a paradox. You're not able to really understand what you've done. I think it's possible. Would take enormous experience with it and doing it again and again and again to be able to, well, it's similar to lucid dreaming, right? There's a paradox in lucid dreaming where you're dreaming, but yet you have to realize that you're dreaming to then become in control of the dream and then be able to navigate within that dream and also not wake up, right? And not lose control. It's a very fine razor's edge there. And so it's very interesting what's happened with the Datura, because it's very much in that side of things with dreaming and lucid dreaming. And so, yeah, there's an awareness of, wait a second, time has not made sense. The continuum of place to place is not making sense, and then click. And then the same vision with the spinning gears, that disc, and then everything kind of faded away. And I wasn't obviously at a kegger party at some other house. And that house was a completely different house, I think somewhere in Highland. Or actually, no, I think that house was in the north end of San Bernardino for that particular one, which it'd be really interesting to even know if it was a real house. I don't actually even know that, but I somehow have a sense that it was in North San Bernardino, and so really interesting there. But yeah, and then I'm sitting back on the couch having been at a kegger, and like I said, I can't stress enough how real the experience is. This is, again, lucid dreaming times 10, times 1,000, really, on steroids. It is as real as it gets. It's as concrete as it gets. So yeah, I came back from that and just blown away. And that was sort of, like I said, the climax. And then I was still having moments where I was talking to people that were in the room, that not there, that weren't really there. And like I said, none of my friends, not, Karen and John were the parents there. No one approached me and said, who are you talking to? What are you doing? What do you want? Like, none of that ever happened. And that, to me, doesn't make sense either. I don't know how that worked. And it was like I was in magical time. It was like I was in magic time in a magic space in which somehow it all worked out. I don't know. I was on the journey myself. I didn't have a scientific observer there to say what was really going on. So this is just my experience with it. But what an experience it was. My first Datura experience was extremely powerful. Well, by the end of it, I always pretty much went home most nights, and I planned on going home, especially because I felt like I could just sleep. It wasn't like other, drugs and experiences where you feel kind of energy charged, MDMA, things like that. Maybe it's a little trouble trying to go to sleep. It's not like that on Datura. So I had no doubt I could just go home and lay down. But the hurdle was I had to walk home, and that walk home is about 4 miles, maybe a little more. And it was nighttime by this time, The Datura experience is very long, sometimes a few days. So it's really, like I said, nothing to mess with, guys. Very lucky for me to have had a positive experience with it. There's something very positive that I experienced, but something extremely powerful and extremely dangerous at the same time. So I feel I was very lucky. So don't take that as, again, I'm not encouraging anyone. But, the hurdle was to go home. And I was concerned because I've had this sense of, like, what am I going to see on the way home? Like, I got 4 miles of dark roads and kind of, at night, some of those neighborhoods too are strange neighborhoods, and just an insecure feeling of, like, what is this going to be like? So I was worried I was going to see demons. I felt like anything could happen. At this point, I felt like anything could happen at any moment. The fabric of this reality could just fall apart, and I could be in some other dimension. You remember, my first LSD experience, my first real LSD experience, I experienced kind of hell, and demons and the devil and really horrific stuff. So I was really afraid of that, because on Datura it might even be worse. I don't know what that would be like, because it would be very concrete, real. So I was worried, am I going to, who knows, right? Who knows what's going to happen? So I decided I had no choice to just go through it. So I started walking home. Probably also a really bad idea, right? I could have walked into traffic, could have got myself killed, hit by a car or something, right? But, kind of an idiot kid. So I just went to walk home. This point, and like I said, a kid, I was probably, I was 18 or something, 19 years old, 18 probably. And so I started walking, and I was nervous, and the sounds are really quiet. Like, there wasn't even like birds chirping, and it just seemed really kind of intense. And then I kind of got into that zone, and then I'm walking with a friend. And we're having a good conversation. My friend's keeping me company, and we're good. That friend was Gabe this time, so it's my friend Gabe. I mentioned that name. and he's kind of walking with me, and then Aaron shows up, different Aaron actually, another Aaron. We had a couple Aaron friends, and he's there, and then this guy Chad's there, and these are all friends of mine. We're all just kind of laughing and talking and walking, and kind of got like an entourage now. And we're walking, and it's the same pattern. So now I'm walking and doing this, but I'm realizing, wait, when did these guys come to walk with me home? What is going on? And that click, same thing, same vision of the exact same disc and rings, same process, and they would either run off. A few times they would literally run off like little imps, like the first time with Aaron in the house, like it, almost like they get real short, almost like elves even, and then they just run and disperse and then just kind of melt into the environment. Other times they would turn into that mist, like I was saying, like with almost a Cheshire cat effect, fading into the background, except for not leaving the smiling, mouth behind, but that kind of thing. And that kept reoccurring and reoccurring. And that experience kept me company. I call it an experience, I don't know what you call that. That cycle of having friends with me the whole time kept me company on the way home, so I wasn't nervous, so I didn't feel scared, it was just my friends with me, having a blast, walking home, telling stories, talking, laughing, talking about, just day-to-day stuff. So I made it all the way home, and I kind of paced around in the end of the cul-de-sac, because I lived in a cul-de-sac there, and I remember just appreciating the beauty of the night. It was beautiful. That night sky, those stars, quiet. Now it wasn't bothering me, now that I'd made it home. And my funny thing on Datura, like my parents' house did not feel foreboding like it did on LSD and mushrooms and things like that. It felt very calm, and I felt completely right with the world. I walked around for probably an hour and a half, just kind of meandering in my front yard and in the cul-de-sac, looking up at the stars, and then I went in and laid down and drifted off into a blackness. That trip did not last several days. The next day I was out of it a bit, kind of foggy and just detached in a way. There were no ill effects afterwards. I was fine. I recovered back to my normal state and just was amazed by the power of Datura. And I felt like the weed does like me. I actually did feel that. I felt like the weed really took care of me. It really gave me a warm, cozy feeling and a great, powerful experience. That vision will be with me for the rest of my life, of seeing that disc and those spinning rings, and I don't know what it means exactly. I have ideas. I have some theories about what it means for what this reality is and what our experience of reality is in this universe. But I'm not going to get into that right now. And I will also tell you that I brought up lucid dreaming. That would be an amazing practice. If you were able to lucid dream and really nail that and bring that practice to the Datura states, I actually don't know what the capabilities are there. I have no idea what a powerful experience that would be if I were able to fully guide those Datura experiences, knowing that I was in some sort of dreamscape. Yeah, there's steps to that, by the way, the whole lucid dreaming thing. There's this idea of even trying to formulate dreams so that you're in real spaces during the real time. So like if you fall asleep, let's say if I was to take a nap now and it was getting towards later part of the day, even maybe sunset a little bit, that you're dreaming at that time. And then let's say I dream that I'm at this space here. Let's say I fell asleep in this chair, then I dream that I'm here. And then there's another level of like dreaming that I'm here and then seeing my body asleep in the chair, which is, I've had that happen to me once. It's frightening, honestly. And that was without Datura. But imagine having that ability if you built a skill around this, and then we're able to utilize that on the during the Datura experience. I don't know what the capability is there. Amazing. But like I said, very dangerous stuff. Certainly can kill you. It's definitely toxic poison. So yeah, not encouraging anyone to go down that road unless you got thousands of years of generational knowledge and you grew up in one of those tribes that uses it. Hey, I'd love to hear from you. Send a comment, get in contact with me, because I would love to talk to someone more about structured experiences with Datura. I've heard some of the other chaotic, just maddening experiences with Datura. I get it. I know it can go there. But this was more of the structured, like I really got a message from it. Yeah, that's it, guys. That was my Datura experience. What a doozy it was. I had a few more. We'll talk about those. And yeah, if you're liking the content, this was a longer one, man. If you stuck through it, thank you for being here through the whole video. Please go to psychedelist.com. We're about to get the Learning Center up, and check out the PEM podcast on here on YouTube and on Rumble. There's also a TikTok. I will be including everything in the description below. Check it out. And yeah, guys, see you next time.